I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. There may be as many as 3 others who are yet to join. But for now, we'll begin with a roll call. Bob Carroll.
Hi, David. Bob's here. Sorry.
Victoria Duckworth.
Present.
Lindsay Fox.
Present.
Anne Marie Foley.
Here.
Deborah George. Brian Houle.
Here.
Chantel Kimball, we know she's not coming. Essek Petrie.
Here.
David Robbins is here. Sue Robbins.
Here.
Colleen Roy. And Roshana Tangi. So I have 8 out of 12. We'll begin, let's see. Action items, we have August 5th meeting minutes available to approve.
I move that we approve the August 5th minutes as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Vote by roll call. Bob Carroll.
Bob Carroll's aye.
Victoria Duckworth.
Aye.
Lindsay.
Aye.
Anne Marie.
Fully aye.
Brian.
Abstain.
Essek.
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Sue.
Aye.
Motion carried by a vote of 7 in favor and 1 abstention. We would have approved these at our November meeting, but we didn't have a quorum.
Mm.
We have 2 other minutes from September 30th and November 6th, which are not yet available for review, unless I missed something. So, Fiona?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chair. We're working on them internally. I think I'm gonna have Natalia start helping out with the minutes going forward, just so we can try and get more of these out and we don't get too backlogged. So hopefully we'll have a few sets of minutes for the next meeting.
Okay. Moving on then to discussion items. We have, unless I'm missing anything, we have our first discussion item is draft chapter reviews. Elena, and I see Colleen is just joining us.
David, if it's okay with the working group, I'm wondering if we can have Gabe go first, since last time we we ran out of time and he didn't have a chance to present. So I thought it's only fair to let him go first, with your permission, of course.
Yep, I have no problem with that. Anybody else have an objection? With no objection, take the floor, Gabe.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Yeah, my name's Gabe Trevor. I'm an associate planner at CMRPC. I do mostly work on land use and zoning, but I've been helping with some of the chapters in the master plan. So today, should I screen share? I can share, Fiona, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I just gave you.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So just making sure I have it set up right. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, good. So today I'm going to talk about just for consideration in the land use chapter. This is the result of a DLT, a district local technical assistance project that Fiona and I conducted this year. And after consulting with the planning board, we thought some of the ideas in this, it might make sense to bring to the master plan committee for comment and consideration in the land use chapter. So what we're discussing today is trying to develop some sort of incentives program to promote mixed use development, specifically looking at the MBTA Communities District, though certainly these strategies could be applied to other places if the committee thought that was interesting. But for now, as I'll explain, there's kind of special circumstances with MBTA that caused us to think about this. So basically, I'm sure you all are aware, but I'll just refresh everyone. In early 2021, the state legislature passed a new law requiring that MBTA communities should have at least one zoning district in which multifamily housing is permitted as right. And this zoning, this multifamily housing has to be allowed at a minimum gross density of 15 multifamily units per acre by right. And so in fall of 2023, Grafton passed a new overlay district, which achieved compliance through 5 sub-districts in North Grafton, Town Center, and South Grafton. And the Attorney General's office approved the overlay district, and the town of Grafton is what was one of the first states, or one of the first towns in at least central Massachusetts to achieve compliance, which is really great. Moving on. So the primary purpose of these new regulations is to encourage the development of moderate density multifamily housing in communities that have or are adjacent to communities with public transit. In central Massachusetts, this is based on the presence of MBTA commuter rail stations like the one in Grafton. And so the purpose of this law was to make multifamily development as easy as possible. And so there are certain restrictions on what towns can do, which may come into conflict with related development goals, such as stronger affordable housing regulations or mixed-use development. And this law clearly shows a bias towards market rate multifamily housing development. And so, with the focus on transit-oriented development and the promotion of density, this legislation is broadly in line with the sustainable development goals put forward by the state. But as I previously stated, it can come at the expense of other types of development that can complement multifamily development. In our case, specifically looking at mixed-use development, featuring a mix of ground floor commercial and office space with multifamily units built above. And so I don't want to, belabor the point, but obviously this sort of mixed-use development can really complement the walkability goals that many of our communities have, and it can really encourage, and obviously it can fit in really well with any sort of multifamily housing. And so in discussing this with Fiona and EOHLC staff, which is the state department that oversees this law, a potential solution would be the addition of some sort of density incentive for mixed use, which would provide developers with an additional floor of height or additional residential unit of density if they committed to a mixed-use development with comparable multi-unit family density as was required to be allowed by right under the law. And so I'll get to some. Fiona and I discussed several different options we could have for our 5 MBTA overlay districts. But broadly speaking, this would encourage developers to build multifamily without sacrificing the housing development goals that are present in these districts. And so Grafton was in the really fortunate position compared to a lot of other communities that you already had a lot, I think basically all of the multifamily housing on the books. It was allowed in the districts that we looked at. So basically most of what our bylaw did was change it from a special permit to by right. And that was able to satisfy the state's requirements. But a lot of communities have had to upzone certain districts to achieve their MBTA compliance. And so we've seen districts with between 2.5 to 10 stories in different communities, but somewhere between 3 and 6 stories is most common. And I have a quote that gets into this, but basically when you're looking at building height in Massachusetts, based on the building code and fire protection measures and building costs, you basically see 6 stories as the limit for any sort of development that isn't more or less in downtown Boston. So as you'll see, some of these districts look at like a 6-story potential. And so, but there are diminishing returns for anything above 6 stories outside of cities. So in looking at most communities, so unfortunately, most communities that have this sort of density bonus are not really representative of Grafton. Grafton is still a relatively small town, and most of the towns where you see these sorts of bonuses are places like Provincetown, Northampton, the like. But Provincetown has a really good bylaw that promotes a density bonus to encourage the development of affordable housing. And so they have 3 different mechanisms to achieve this. They have a density bonus, which allows for bonus market rate units for specific, in exchange for specific deed restricted units. A building height bonus that allows for the creation of a full extra story to accommodate extra deed restricted units. and a fee reduction bonus, which waives fees if 1/6 of the units are deed restricted. And so I've looked so initially I just looked at the height bonus, but I in discussing this with Fiona, we also are, you know, looking at a density bonus. And again, this is all very much proposed. This is just something we think would be an interesting way to promote mixed use. This is not, you know, we don't really have a bylaw developed or anything, but it's something I think the master plan committee should have on their radar and might be worthy of consideration in the chapter. So this is Fiona, this is new. I mean, this is something I put together today after our conversation last week. But basically, we have 5 mixed use or 5 multifamily MBTA districts around Grafton. We have District 1 and 4, which are in North Grafton near the train station. We have District 5. I forget how we got to this numbering, but it's always kind of funny when I have to type it out to explain it. I think it was just based on the spreadsheet we did for the state. But we have Districts 1 and 4 in the north. We have District 5, which is in town center. And then we have Districts 2 and 3, which are to south near Fisherville. And so I'm going to start with town center because I think that's the most sensitive option. But after discussing this with Fiona, it doesn't really make sense to do any sort of height density bonus. But under and Dave, feel free to correct me if the unit density numbers are inaccurate. I tried to find the latest version of the compliance spreadsheet we put together. But basically, the idea is that with a density, we could craft some sort of density bonus where if a developer chose to bring in mixed use under the MBTA compliance, it assumes that you are allowing up to 26 residential units per acre by right. And so basically, that's kind of assuming that you have, I believe, a 4-story height limit in those districts, and that every floor is going to be a residential floor. The idea with this is that a developer could, it would allow a developer to build mixed use and then kind of take that 4-floor density and maybe use smaller units, do studio apartments, do 1-bedroom units, and put that on the top 3 floors instead of across all 4 floors. And the exact mechanism of how to get there, I think we would probably need to get into more detail from a zoning perspective, but that would be kind of the concept. And then looking at North Grafton, where I think the height bonus makes I think it would be the fairest place to put a height bonus. If you look at how some other towns have developed the areas around their train stations, you have sort of commuter and office building centric developments that can operate under the assumption that a lot of those people are going to hop on the train and go to another place for work, or that people are taking the train to the office building there. And so, and also kind of the location of North Grafton, north of the Pike, I think you would mitigate some of the traffic concerns that you might see in other parts of Grafton. But the idea is that in MCMOD 1 and 4, you would see that 5-story height limit increased to 6 stories in the potential of a mixed-use development, which I know is rather tall for Grafton. But I think if you look at some transit areas in other towns in Massachusetts and around the country, it's not. I don't know if it's super out of line. And when you're talking about 5 stories as a baseline, and the current zoning rules, which allow for quite a bit of height with a parking deck connected, I don't think it's totally out of the ordinary. And then looking in South Grafton, I think when you look at the MCMOD 2, which as you can see on the screen is this portion, similarly to town center, I think it would make sense to do some sort of unit density bonus that would allow you could do it one way where you keep it at 4 stories and allow that extra unit density in the top 3 stories in exchange for ground floor commercial and office space. And then in MCMOD 3, currently it allows for up to 5 stories of development. I think that's a place where we could consider increasing that to 6 stories. I know that is kind of a priority development parcel for the town. But I also understand it's a large building height. So yeah, that's that's where we're at with this. Fiona and Dave, and if anyone else also wants to chime in, I'm happy to discuss this.
So Gabe, I think I'll just provide some additional context, just so the group can understand. So the MB, this, as Gabe kind of briefly mentioned, this mixed use conversation came up a lot when towns were trying to comply with Section 3A. And we've heard continuously from not only business owners, but from members of the public that they would like to see more mixed use. However, mixed use is definitely more challenging to implement. And we're trying, and the goal really of this is to create incentives to produce this mixed use development. I mean, the goal here is to, carrot and stick. We this is something that the town has expressed that they want to see on the back end, and we're going to have to try and do some finagling with our existing regulations to make it economically feasible, because all we're seeing as of late is completely, residential development. And that's all we'll kind of continue to see unless we try and incorporate some of this. And, I understand that lately, if folks who attended town meeting, they'll see that, the conversation went a little bit differently. But the reality of the situation is that Grafton has a very small commercial base, extremely small. Residential will continue to kind of drive the market. And these solutions are what towns in Central Mass, the Cape, Boston, everywhere are evaluating. So to Gabe's point, we're not saying that we absolutely have to do this, but it's definitely like this plan, as we've continued to say, is 10 to 20 years in the future. Grafton will be different. And is this something that we want to try and incorporate into the future of Grafton? I mean, and just not to belabor the point, but some of these these height limits in particular might seem a little stark reading them on the slide. However, that's why we tried to tailor it based on the sub-district that we're talking about. For example, the MCMOD 5, which is near the Common, we understand that that's not something that we would maybe evaluate the height bonus, but the density bonuses Gabe mentioned. But a lot of these areas that we used for MBTA communities compliance already allowed a lot of density and make a lot of sense to have density there. For example, in North Grafton by the T station, I mean, that is just a no-brainer to have to incentivize this type of development around there. And then in South Grafton, as we've kind of continued to talk about this throughout the master plan process, but South Grafton, we're really trying to focus on as well to generate interest in investment. South Grafton is an area that we want to see more growth. We want to see more housing. And one of the, I believe it's MCMOD 3, which is Fisherville Mill. That site in particular is a perfect example of attempt after attempt after attempt to try and get something to happen on a site in South Grafton. And I have heard personally from developers who've been interested in purchasing the parcel at various times, oh, the zoning doesn't make sense, or I'm not going to make any money off of it because the site is like, it's basically a gigantic floodplain, and there's wetland, and there's environmental cleanup, and I can only go to a certain density. I can only go to a certain height after I spend all the money to get the site ready to be developed. I'm not going to have much money left. So anyway, long story short is that this was the potential approaches are very specific based on the area that we're talking about, and we can kind of mix and match. And I also wanted to make a point to say that the fee reduction strategy was also something that Gabe and I discussed. I know some other communities, I think Provincetown was the community that Gabe mentioned, where they've provided, some relief in that area too, sewer, water, building fees, what have you. So yeah, I just wanted to provide a little bit more context and maybe answer any questions that anyone might have as to how we got here.
Colleen,
The idea of including this in the master plan so that it's, something to be thinking about as we grow, and including the fee reduction, I think, in addition to the heights, where you say the MOD 5, there's, the height wouldn't make sense, but having a fee reduction, which we have been doing in Grafton case by case with some developments and in a little bit here and there, but having a systematic way of doing it would be really good. I really like that.
Anne Marie.
I have a couple of questions and then a couple of comments. So Gabe, you indicated that these 5 current MBTA overlay districts are okay for 5 stories now? That we've already,
So,
okay,
1, 3, and 4 all have 5 story, up to 5 stories, and 2 and 5 all have up to 4 stories right now.
okay. And then, so the MCMOD 5, is that not already permitted, or is there more space at that site?
I could answer that, Gabe and Dave. So that site, the site of 17 and 27 is permitted, but there are 2 other parcels there, albeit they're small. So, it's going to be a significantly less footprint, but the district area consists of, give me 1 second here, sorry. 17, 25, 23, and 27 Upton Street. But yes, but the majority of the buildable area in that sub-district is already permitted.
Okay, and then just a comment, I've been quite involved in the Fisherville mill for the last 25 years or 20 years. So I would say that there certainly are other mitigating factors that have been going on there. Not so much as you're presenting it that, adding another level is going to make it or break it for a developer. And then just lastly, for me, this just seems super specific. This has kind of come up in other chapters, like even the fact that you're coming up with this level of specificity, say for this MCMOD 5, which really only is kind of 2 small parcels. I don't know, it just doesn't seem to me that it's very master plan, like, 10,000 foot looking at things. It just seems very micromanaging within the master plan, as opposed to just kind of setting a greater, I suppose, goal and what have you. So, this just seems to me it's kind of more of it's just very specific and bylaw related, et cetera, for what I would go into a master plan. So this doesn't really do it for me in terms of the way. Yeah. I don't know how you would put this in here, but for me, I wouldn't be for the way it's being presented.
Yeah, just for context, this was not initially put together for had anything to do with the master plan. This was more at CMRPC, we're dealing with a lot of communities dealing with the MBTA zoning and kind of seeing how we can massage the state requirements and still comply with them while promoting other sorts of development that aren't just market rate multifamily development within those districts, which often are the priority development districts for a town. So totally understandable if it seems too specific for the master plan. I don't think if I were to write like an action item or something like that, it would be something about consider, broadly speaking, consider how we can promote mixed use with these types of fee reductions or density bonuses. Not so much. Well, here I wouldn't include a map and talk specifically about the MBTA districts necessarily, but yeah, this was something that we were bringing to the planning board in the context of how to improve upon the MBTA zoning, but they thought it might make sense as a more future. Something more in the future, not something that the planning board wanted to talk about this year. But I appreciate the comment.
Okay, Essex, Petrie, next hand.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just wanted to just kind of build on that. And I do think the strategy is good and if appropriately kind of melded into the master plan could work as far as identifying ways the town is being flexible. And I think it's a value to add to Grafton moving forward to provide the opportunity for that flexibility in those. So understand the point that it maybe is too specific at this level for the master plan, but as a potential strategy to achieve some of the goals in the master plan overall, I think it's appropriate and makes a lot of sense.
Okay, Lindsay?
Yeah, so if I get that, this, I agree that, it's the potential idea and approach, could really, check a lot of boxes. And I just wanted to confirm, if you are doing this, it complies with the MBTA community, like it would, blend well with it and wouldn't, like, it's not in addition to, is that correct? Like, we're not expanding on it, it's within those communities and,
Yeah, so I mean, the way this was originally conceived, I had a couple conversations when we were writing the initial MBTA compliance. I had a couple conversations with Fiona and a couple conversations with EOHLC staff, kind of about would something like this, would this be allowed? Would this keep the, could we do something like this to promote mixed use while keeping the town in compliance? Specifically talking about the height bonus, but I would imagine the density bonus would have the same thing. And yeah, so this was conceptualized specifically for the existing MBTA districts. It could certainly be something applied elsewhere, but that was not, and Fiona and I discussed a couple options, but that was not, it was initially conceived as like, how do we take the MBTA law and make it better to promote things that the town also wants that aren't just this one type of development? And it's very much, we've been, if this were to get passed and we would go through, if this was to be brought to town meeting, we probably would get a more thorough process to like bring something to EOHLC before we brought it to town meeting and make sure that it wouldn't get flagged. But yeah, this was very much like conceived of as a evolution of the MBTA zoning to promote other town interests.
Are these kind of things like done, have other towns been successful making these kind of changes, or is this just so new that this isn't really?
Yeah, this is very new because we at least in central Massachusetts, we still have a few towns that like are on track to get compliance and haven't got, like, they still have time to get compliance. So the law is so new. I don't think this specifically has been done yet. I'm sure other towns are looking into options. And I do understand that like the state, there's just like there's a lot of diverse towns in like a lot of towns in the East that have more diverse development situations that have had to push for different changes to accommodate what they're trying to do there. So I'm sure other towns are considering similar things, but I can't speak to that specifically.
Gabe, I might just chime in really quickly, and sorry, Colleen, I'm cutting you off very quickly, but so just Lindsay, just one of the reasons why this even came about was the state was receiving a lot of pushback about the inability to incorporate mixed use more into the law. And I think there was actually in Central Mass, there was a lot. Gabe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like it was not a great example, but Holden and like Pack, like those area, like the state was hearing a lot, especially from like our region, about how can we utilize mixed use better. So not saying that, Central Mass was the driving force, but kind of just to understand like the impetus of this, like communities in the Commonwealth kind of asked for it. No one really, as far as I know, I don't think that anyone aggressively went after this in particular, but it definitely was something that towns were interested in and raised flags at EOHLC about having better ways to incorporate this type of development style.
And the thing, I think like some interesting context too, is that EOHLC EOHLC is the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. They sort of enforce this law, but they didn't really write it. So they have a lot of other, like I was talking about, the sort of like smart growth model, pushing for mixed use development. They have other pushing for complete streets. There's a lot of other things that they want to see happen that don't have to do with like them enforcing the law. And so I think on their end too, when I brought this up to them, they were like, oh, that's really cool. Like you should try to get something like that put together because we want to see mixed use development. We know this law, they know that the law isn't ideal and is kind of preventing certain things from happening that they'd like to see. So, I think in the future, there's going to be, people are going to iterate on this once towns kind of get their baseline compliance figured out.
Okay, Colleen?
So I just wanted to ask a quick question. You said Provincetown already has density bonus and fee reduction structures in place already, and they have it beyond MBTA because they're not an MBTA community, correct?
No, so I pulled that because I thought it was a well-written bylaw. Theirs is specifically about promoting like deed restricted affordable housing development. It has nothing to do with MBTA.
I think that's a great idea, and to the point of having it be a broader approach for the master plan, but including the idea of density bonuses and fee reductions beyond the MBTA community. But is there a way to include something like this as an appendix? So when people are reviewing the master plan and they say, oh, that's a good idea, how can we implement this? Here's an example of how we can implement it without it being so much in the master plan, but a part of the master plan. Is that something we could consider?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably tweak this quite a bit to do that, but I think that would, I mean, I'm happy to help with that, but it's up to the committee.
Yeah, Fiona?
Yeah, just to Colleen's point, quickly. So, and kind of the points that were made throughout this conversation is that if it's not accounted for in the master plan, and then then we, the planning department years down the line tries to implement this, the first question will always be, oh, well, where is this documented, the need for this? Like, it seems like you're making this decision rather somehow unilaterally, like at least if it's accounted for on the master plan, we can point and say, well, we've had this discussion, we've evaluated the pros and the cons, and, we've decided to put it in the plan, albeit like as a goal, a long-reaching goal to achieve, but as long as it's documented in the plan itself, I think that is important.
Yeah, my thinking on this topic and why this particular idea is relevant to the master plan is that, some of the goals that we've talked about in the master plan are around, strengthening our small business community, building up our village centers, looking for, opportunities to, get more housing, more focused in the village centers. And part of that, and this is where I think the master plan should be going, is part of that is, how do we achieve these goals? And part of achieving these goals is incentives for the kind of development we would like to see. And here are some examples of incentives. And certainly within the master plan, I wouldn't limit this thinking to the MBTA communities districts, but more broadly, as some other people have said, and I won't dwell on it because it's already been said, incentives for achieving the goals that we would like to achieve is very much, a necessary part of how we get there. Brian.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Dave. I'm going to agree with Colleen in terms of, I really would like to see mixed use be part of our communities. Grafton grew up in an area where a time when there was a lot of, businesses and residential together. And certainly small businesses today could use some help in that regard, and having the ability to have mixed use. It may not work with large developments as we're seeing with what happened on Upton Street, but we have existing buildings and we have existing properties in certain areas of Grafton that could probably become exceptional places to utilize mixed use. As we've noted, we just don't have the plan in place to make it happen. So I agree that we should have something put into the master plan that would allow for that, or at least point to it in a more definitive way. That's my point.
Sue.
I agree with what Brian just said, and it's important. I think, like Mr. Petrie said, this is a strategy. I think it needs to be put in there. And we have a history in the beginning that we had mixed use in the beginning. And I think it worked. And there are people in town now that would like to see more mixed use. So I think it's important that we put it into the master plan.
All right, anything else on this particular topic? Thank you, Gabe, for the presentation and for all the discussion, everybody. And I hear a clear consensus that while we may not in the master plan describe it in terms of really specific details, we do want to include these ideas as examples of incentives for for achieving the kind of development that the master plan wants to achieve. And these are examples. I think I would certainly broaden the topic to say, yeah, we should explore in the near future, as we continue to progress towards our goals, we need to explore all the incentives and all everything that would help us to achieve the goals. So we have some examples of incentives here, and there are probably others. Certainly, we'd like to at least in the master plan identify the need to work out how we are going to get to our goals.
I agree, David, and I think we can definitely incorporate this in either the housing and population chapter or the land use chapter. I'm inclined to add it to the land use chapter, given some of the technical aspects of NBTA communities, but maybe the focus needs to be on incentives, as you noted, rather than compliance with NBTA communities, but we'll certainly incorporate.
Okay, great. If there's nothing else on this topic, then again, thank you, Gabe, and
yeah, thank you everyone for listening, and yeah, I hope you have the rest of your meeting is productive.
And so, Elena, now we're moving on to chapter review.
Yes, absolutely. So today, Sarah and I will be going through two chapters, economic development and land use. We have some revisions that are still ongoing on the other chapters. There are 4 more chapters that need revisions. We already discussed quality of life and services and facilities. So those have been edited, and Sarah can confirm that because she led that process. But today I think we have time for economic development, land use, and then for the non-chapter elements, Sarah and I put together an introduction and a summary of community engagement, and we have a first draft of the layout and the graphics that and the general look of the plan. Of course, we're still editing at this point, so we're looking forward to your comments. Sarah, do you want to start us off with economic development?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everybody. I will highlight some more major revisions based on your comments that are either in the draft that is most recently in the Dropbox or in progress, and a more detailed explanation of how we've been approaching the comments is available in the shared Excel that you have been commenting in. But I wanted to highlight the following, and happy to slow down at any point if you'd like to see it in the chapter, or I can share my screen. We added Route 140 as a major transportation route. And figure 8, which is that vacant developable land figure that we talked about the last time this chapter was under review. It's on page 9 of the PDF. There will be a more up-to-date figure to reflect the new development in North Grafton. For figure 10, which is on the 12th page of the PDF, we refreshed this map to be a little bit less busy and to add more about the smaller commercial centers that also exist in Grafton, rather than focusing on just the larger villages that get more press. Also in progress is adding a little bit more context for commercial tax contributors. So we had a few comments on this about how much different businesses or industrial endeavors in Grafton will be contributing to the tax base when we say things like building the commercial tax base will help residential users. So we'll add a little bit more context on that in the chapter. And I think those were the high level comments that we've been implementing. Anything else I can help with?
So, Sarah and CMRPC team, so we did have some comments that were uploaded into the matrix. I don't know if everybody got a chance to upload their comments. I am guilty of not having the opportunity to upload my comments as well. But from my perspective, this has captured well what the group has been saying, our goals. Obviously, like the data points are great and the mapping is good too. So I don't have anything that I'm kind of looking at that I'm like, oh, it's definitely no, or definitely needs to be struck out, or whatever, what have you. I will. Sorry, this is not a satisfactory answer, but I will have a little bit more of a deep dive tomorrow, where I can just anything that isn't already discussed this evening, I'll can flag. But but all in all, it does look great. So.
Thank you, Fiona. And I think Joe is still adding details about TIFs. So that's also still in progress.
CMRPC, are you looking for any other specific data at this point? Like local data? You think? Or maybe I should just, I've been talking back and forth with the chapter author, Joe. And I think he should have most things, but if there's anything else that you can think of that you need from me, just let me know.
I think, just one, I mean, I'm sure we can think of a long list, but one thing that comes to mind right now is the number of businesses registered as doing business as. We have a figure from 2022, and I want to make sure we're including the latest number. We could reach out to the town clerk, but if you have a direct line, you may get a faster answer on that.
Okay. Yep, I will do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm working on a couple of requests that Joe sent over for some mapping information and some data on undeveloped parcels. But I should probably will have that available. There's one list of parcels. I'm not going to dwell on it tonight because we can work this offline. But I'm going to get some review from Fiona and putting some data together. But I should get that done within the next day or two for Joe.
Thank you, David. And this map, the village centers with zoning, this also appears in land use. We'll have to decide whether my inclination is to keep it in both chapters, even though it's a duplicate, or refer to the other one. But for for the reader's convenience, it's we might keep it in both.
Yeah, it's really primarily about land use because it covers both housing and business. So it's hard to say which if there's just one place where it belongs, but it's relevant to both.
So I'm CMRPC. I'm happy to kind of keep scrolling, but I think maybe unless, and Dave, you let me know, but unless anyone has anything in particular, it sounds like people are happy with the draft.
I mean, we did spend a fair amount of time, for those of us who were able to make the November meeting, we spent a fair amount of time going over this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but for those who haven't, previously had time to go over it, I would certainly recommend, reviewing it. And on the Dropbox, there is this, this latest version. But go through that, go through the comments, add any comments that you think are necessary.
And I would add to that, because the chapter authors went through that already, I'm sure they're keeping track, but for to make it easy for everyone to keep track of new comments, maybe we can mark them as new.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This will be the second round of edits. Just to make sure we don't miss one.
Will do. Okay, then I will stop sharing this then. If we're good to go.
Thank you. And Joe has marked, there is a column in the spreadsheet with the comments where Joe has marked the comments that were edited, the ones that are in progress, and somewhere he has questions and comments about. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. There is a notes comment. I'm sorry, a notes column on the right in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think that's helpful for everyone who's looking at this. It's a good way to keep track of. That's part of that kind of serves part of the purpose of noting the comments that have already been read and responded to, and new comments in this spreadsheet won't have anything in the notes column.
Yeah, and on that note, David, we haven't done the same for land use. Mike will add some of the comments to the land use tab in the spreadsheet, just to make it easier to keep track. But I think we can move on to land use. I could share my screen, or Fiona, you're welcome to do it as well, but I could do it.
Sure, let me just find it easier to download it to my desktop. Sorry, bear with me for a second while I get that done. Okay. And just tell me where you want me to go.
So we will start with
Oh, sugar, where is it? Sorry, 1 second. This is
no
gonna
worries. And I have it open, so if you want me to share it,
Okay, sure.
I'll do that.
Sorry.
Okay, so Mike has done a round of edits on these. He has made several corrections of names in the chapters. So some of the discussion was focused on corrections of names. On page 4, we have a table of land acquisitions. Between 2001 and 2023, there were some corrections to be made on the status of projects. I'm sorry, there were some errors in the information included in the chapter regarding the town's acquisition of land. So the chapter author corrected this and added some additional information in this table and in the paragraph that follows. Then there was also some additions to flexible development. So some additional information was included throughout the chapter, including on this page. He also added some information about TDR, transfer of development rights, in response to one of your comments, Fiona. I'm not sure if that is still in progress, whether we're adding some more clarifications about that. Such as an example, I think your point was this is uncommon. Can we look at an example about this? So I believe that's still in progress.
Yeah, that essentially was my comment, and just trying to understand. I know that it's used a lot in other states, and I haven't seen a lot of examples of it in Mass, and I just want to make sure it's something that's realistic for Grafton. So I think, yeah, Mike is still looking into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea was it works very well in very strong real estate markets. Thought, Grafton has a strong real estate market. It could work. Colleen.
This might be a silly question, but that chart we were just looking at, the land acquisition chart, can someone explain to me why it's separated the way it is between 2001 to 2009 and then 2001 to 2023?
Yes, since I was the one who made that separation. Let me see if I remember why I did it that way. I think it has to do with the fact that if you scroll down to that graph, you'll see that's sort of the cumulative area and cost, and you see the graph rising up fairly steeply up through 2009, and then it levels off after 2009. So what that told me was that's really the majority of the land acquisition we've done since 2001 was done in that 2001 to 2009 interval, and I think the numbers sort of bear that out. Going back up to the table, that for the total cost up through from 2001 to 2009, it's 5 million, and then we added just another couple of million since 2009. Now, whether it's really important to make that distinction is a whole other question. But the previous version of this chart, based on older data, did a similar division to the time intervals. The years of division were different. It was kind of, again, based on the perception that that the town spent a lot of resources acquiring land in this current version. From 01 to 09, we were very active in acquiring land, and then since 09, we've been much less active.
So I guess my question is it a cumulative between 2001 and 2023, or should it say 2010 to 2023?
Now the 01 to 23 is cumulative for the entire period.
Okay. Thank you.
Another way of looking at it is, of that $7 million we've spent since 01, 5 of it was spent up from 01 to 09. And again, it's what one might debate whether that particular point needs to be noted, that we slowed down after 09.
If you look at conservation, though, the cost from 2001 to 2003 is lower than the cost of 2001 to 2009. Or unless if the number's getting cut off there.
Yeah, no, that is correct.
So we
The
spent,
first, yeah. Yeah, and it's made slightly complicated by the fact that the second line of the table was a combination of conservation and open space. So that was, it's in terms of the actual parcels of land that were acquired. And I don't know whether there's a better way to present this data. It's one might wonder, is it really too detailed?
Maybe,
I mean, I'm confused. The cost should be in that, if it's cumulative, the cost should be higher in that second line, right? Not lower.
Yeah, I think Colleen's right. Just, I think it's valuable information. Sorry, just to interject, but so
Yeah.
you scroll up just under that first line there. So it may in fact be true that from 2021 to 2000 to 09, we spent 25, whatever it is, or 2.5 million. But then over there on the left, it should be probably 2.8,
Right.
2.9, right?
340 would not be that's not right. That is not consistent with everything else here. So
Yeah,
that
the other
number
one's
may not be right.
That one should be like 2.9.
Yeah, what are the chances that I've got those numbers more locally here? I know I sent those numbers over, but where's my copy of the numbers that I sent over?
Yeah, I just tallied it up doing 2.5 plus the 340 and then went down your line there on the first chart, and it didn't come up to 7 million. It's just under, but maybe just something to correct, I guess.
Yeah, so that was, well, rather than trying to dig up the actual numbers now,
May I just suggest, David, that you relook at this chart and clarify it a little bit better and maybe put in some statement as to what you were trying to achieve, because I think there's too many questions on this chart and it's difficult to clarify it just by changing numbers. So I think you may have to do this whole thing over, but the chart I think is important, but just better clarification.
yeah, I'll make a note to myself to try to find the correct numbers for that.
thank you. Thanks for that point, Stu. I think we should pair this table with some explanation in the narrative. And David, just to make sure that we capture what we're trying to show here, if you could give us a couple of sentences to guide the reader through this table, that would be very helpful.
Yep.
Bob also has his hand up.
No, I think you got mine. I was just looking lower down and had some questions with the consistency and then what the overall purpose and what we were trying to convey with this table. Yeah, so I think, Dave, you just got to go line by line, because I look at like open space, we bought from 01 to 09 6 parcels for no money, but then we got 4 more, if I'm reading this right, in 01 to 23, and then 150K.
Yeah, most of those parcels were donated to the town.
Right.
Okay, so maybe if we just put that in there or something like that for other readers like me that aren't familiar with that.
Yeah, like maybe in the 6 spaces of open, in the 6 parcels of open space for 34.9 acres, maybe it should have a 0 in there for cost.
Yeah, you could, or just put zero cost. That's fine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
in fact,
overall, I
see-
think you hit on it, but I was like, okay, what's the message here? What is this trying to convey?
Well, to me, when I look at this, even though I have some questions, I think what it conveys is where we are up to this point, what we have done and what, what we've accomplished with this property. So it just needs to be worked on a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'll just reiterate Sue's point that, clearly a lot of progress was made in Grafton between 01 and 09, and then it started to kind of level out as we see in the chart. So just kind of comparing over time the progress that was made during these specific timeframes as a point of reference. So.
Yep.
But the level out because of why? Because of cost, because of budget, because of external factors?
Probably all three. Namely cost, and maybe and I would just, and I have nothing to back this up specifically, but the number of subdivision applications that we've seen probably dwindled. And if you're doing a type of flexible style of development for a subdivision, there's often open space dedicated as part of that effort, which is a large a large portion of open space in town is generated that way. Those are just a couple of examples, but it is probably likely, costs, maybe chapter land not becoming available in the town, or it's coming available and the town doesn't want to exercise their right of first refusal, et cetera.
Yeah, so the observation here is that, the town's acquisition of land did indeed level off quite a bit after 2009. And so first of all, it is an observation, and it does raise the question, well, why do you suppose that happened? And the pace of subdivision development leveled off dramatically after right around that same time. The 2008 recession basically choked off a lot of development. So so it's partly that. It's just partly it's opportunities that arose. People choosing to withdraw or not withdraw land from chapter land. So it's with less subdivisions development, there's less opportunity for subdivision open space to be acquired by the town, with fewer opportunities for acquiring chapter land. Those are probably the major factors. But really, when you look at the overall pace of development in town, development, just housing development generally just markedly leveled off after 2009, and between that and perhaps the towns with you can sort of speculate, maybe there was less appetite for the town to acquire open space. Maybe town finances came into somewhat of a consideration here. So
right, and I think you folks are making great points and have command of the facts, right? You know all the reasons. What I'm trying to understand is the story, right? What's the story here, and what are these statistics trying to? I mean, I can make some conclusion and inferences from the statistics, but what's the story and why is it important and part of the master plan?
So you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, does this chart here include the CPC acquisitions?
Yes.
Okay, under open space?
It's most CPC acquisitions are probably entirely included within the conservation line.
All right, thank you.
And perhaps, someone mentioned a little bit more narrative to accompany this, to explain this. And that's probably one component of explaining what is in each of these categories, you know, what is the significance of it?
Yep.
Elena and Sarah, I might just recommend, I'm just trying to keep my eye on the time here, so I think that we've captured what we need to do for this and see if there's anything else further down that we need to
Yeah,
talk
thank you.
about.
Yeah, we very briefly, there was some contradictory information regarding industrial zoning and R20 zoning, and that was resolved. And there, I'm just going to scroll toward the bottom where we have some additional maps. This is the map that appears in economic development. Maybe we'll keep this one, as I mentioned, and refer to it in economic development. Then there's also village centers with existing use. And then there is housing density, a map that David provided. And I think we'll highlight this map and make it a little bit larger.
Fiona, your hand is up.
Yeah, sorry. Can you, what was the issue with the industrial and R20 zoning?
There was some inconsistent data, you know, that
The labeling?
Matt and I had a conversation, an email conversation about that. It seemed like several weeks ago now, but yes, there was a glitch in the zoning data that was downloaded from the town website.
Yep. Okay. Sorry. Yes, I did know that. Just for the rest of the group's edification, there was a labeling error between few zones, so we worked out those kinks.
So just to wrap this up, we'll highlight this density map. We'll make it larger. This includes new approved projects. So this is a very recent data. And then village centers with existing use. This is another addition, and there was a lot more detail added to the goals and action items. I won't stop to highlight anything. It's just that they were expanded. And again, in the interest of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just ask with that, you know, with those village center maps, in particular the village center with existing use. I mean, that's, you know, I would ask anyone who's, you know, really wants to think about to take a closer look at those. I don't know how much explanation we've included with those maps, but it was kind of, yeah. What am I trying to say? Understanding what those maps mean and why the village center lines are drawn the way they are in those maps. There probably ought to be some explanation of that, because it just sort of the maps. If the maps just appear out of thin air, you know, the reader might ask themselves, "Oh, why were those lines drawn that way?" You know, I can, since I drew those maps, I can explain a lot more detail why I identified the village centers that I did and why I drew the lines the way they did. But I guess among other things, I'd like some other feedback on that. You know, do those maps really make sense? I mean, you know, I'd like to think that I did things exactly right, but there's no guarantee of that. So the meaning of those maps, if it doesn't, we may want to have, you know, a little bit more of an explanation of, you know, where those maps came from and why they look the way they do.
We'll reach out to you. Mike will reach out to you for, we'll add more of an explanation. We try to weave them into the story, but just to make sure we capture.
Yeah, and you know, if ultimately, if those maps really don't quite make sense in the context of the master plan, I don't feel so attached to them that they have to be there or that they have to be there in exactly the way they look now. You know, it was as much as anything as a means for me to think about where in Grafton we've got these goals of developing, you know, sort of, you know, you know, denser development and, you know, common, you know, mixed use development in village centers. Well, what does that mean? You know, and when I start looking at that, I see, you know, 8 places in Grafton that each sort of could be a village center and could possibly be an area where we focus on, you know, incentivizing mixed use development, incentivizing denser housing. But you know, I thought it up, but I don't know if it makes sense to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's really the context around it. What is the direction of development for the next 10 to 20 years? This is also a historic development pattern, but I think that's really the context in which we're presenting these maps.
Yeah.
Is concentrating development in those areas where there's existing infrastructure and they're already historically more dense. Any other questions on land use?
Fiona, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just, Dave, not to be nitpicky about it, but the village, centers with existing use, it would be really beneficial to have like an inset on that map so we can zoom in. So an inset is basically like a little box that's added to the side of the map that zooms in on areas of concentrated activity, because I'm reading it and it's hard for me to read unless we CMRPC team want to tease this out, have it as a full separate page as an 11 by 17 or something like that, just so it's bigger and easier to read, because I like the map and I think it should stay, but I just want it to be a little bit more clearer and like reader friendly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I sort of threw this together.
Yeah, and definitely
And-
wasn't expecting, you know,
Yeah, and
anything too fancy, but just so we can, because like you can see like in the little pockets that are outlined, there's a lot going on, and I think if people can understand that, then
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if this is something that we find useful, then by all means,
Mhm.
improving the presentation is, you know, whatever could be done to improve the presentation would be awesome.
Yeah, my days of when I used to write master plans myself, I would always have to be like, okay, what is the reader going to see? Is it going to make sense for them? And I think like these maps are awesome, and I think if we can give them the more attention and clarity, that's just my only point there.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you could zoom in on each one of those marked out village center areas with a full page picture or a half page or whatever that
Mhm.
really shows it in much more detail.
Yeah, David, I believe we have a PDF of this that will allow us to zoom in without, because it's vector. If not, we'll reach out to you for a PDF and we can focus on each one of these village centers. We already talk about them individually, and that may be where we add the zoomed in. So we add the general map and then these zoomed in village center insets.
Yeah, the PDF I made has, you know, with, I think the resolution was good enough that it can be easily zoomed in. And, you know, the other alternative is this is all done with GIS. I can use my, or I can provide you guys with the shape files, and there's, you know, any number of things we might do to this. But yeah, as far as, you know, yeah, as I said, I'm not married to any of this, but you know, it's particularly not the specific presentation here. If the information is good, the presentation can be adjusted as much as necessary.
That's right. Any other questions on land use? If not, we can move on to the intro, I will just go through it very quickly. Feel free to read through it. This is work in progress. So we started putting together the graphics for the plan, the non-chapter elements. As I said, we put together an introduction with some of the general key findings of the plan, and I'll go through it very quickly. That is still evolving. We want to make sure we have a global view on the entire plan. And there's some things that still need to be included. So this is the cover. With the adopted date, table of contents with all the chapters. Here we have, we actually have a question for you here under the master plan working group. There have been quite a few changes throughout this past year, and we've included the original list of working group members. If you think it's appropriate, we could divide it between former members, current members. We thought we would include everyone because everyone contributed, but we will absolutely defer to you on how we want this list organized.
I would say unless anybody else has a different opinion, I wouldn't just, include the names of everybody who was ever part of the working group. Anne Marie.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too. Just, I think I see 2 people on there that never attended a meeting. So maybe just if you confirm that at least they attended 1 meeting. But outside of that, I think including everyone is a good idea.
Yep, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I do know for a fact that Philip was unable to attend any meeting at all. Expressed initial interest, but then couldn't attend, so.
Okay, so in that case, we can remove Philip.
Was Bruce Spinney ever at a meeting? And then I just wondered about Doreen as well, DeFazio.
Doreen did it. I think Bruce and Doreen were there at the beginning for a few meetings, but I don't know off the top of my head how many, so I'll check.
Yeah, I've got I think a complete attendance list, and Philip.
We don't have to go through it now. That was just my quick comment. That's all.
Yeah.
Fiona, we'll reach out to you to coordinate to make sure that it's included.
Sounds good.
We have a few pages with glossary. What is a master plan? We found some great pictures in the Library of Congress with Wyman Gordon's plant from the 1960s. Great pictures of manufacturing in action. This is the vision we've worked on. We've also reached out to Parks and Recreation. A lot of the pictures you see in the non-chapter elements belong to Parks and Recreation, and they've already published them on Facebook. Especially the pictures of children, they've been cleared with parents. This is what we were informed, but we're still coordinating with them to make sure that every picture is okayed by Parks and Rec. And we're also reaching out to the fire department, and we got some photos from their Facebook page as well. This is the plan. Sorry. I thought there was a question. Interrupt me anytime there's a question. I can't see my the side of my screen where everyone is. So if there are any questions, I cannot see them. Plan timeline, we're still ironing this out, but we got the main steps in. We have an executive summary with an overview of the town and some of the important aspects of the town, such as historical development patterns, and contemporary growth, and this sort of tension that was highlighted in several chapters in the plan. Tension both between housing development, open space, but also commercial uses. We're highlighting some main points of economy and industry. This, again, this is very high level. It's mostly positive here, where we don't get into the nitty gritty of the main challenges in the overview. We just, this is a snapshot of the town. Land use and housing, community and quality of life. This really is kind of what we want to highlight in the intro. And a little bit of challenges and opportunities about rapid growth, public services, and the vision for the future. And we're referring to the chapters that address these individual topics in this narrative. Again, as I mentioned, we're still crafting this, still adding more details to it, but this is generally the shape that it will take. Then we have a community input and participation section. We highlighted the main activities, starting with the July 11th public workshop, the one we organized at Apple Tree Arts, the October 19th public workshop at the Grafton High School, also the survey and the demographics of the respondents to the survey, and closing with the economic development workshop on January 24th of this year. So we captured most of the activities, and we have some of the workshop results here and some survey quotes, but we are expanding this to include a little bit more and a little bit more survey results. Then we have a section on key priorities. This is again a global high-level view on the town where we're trying to capture the key issues. There is a little bit of redundancy with the individual chapters, and this is really what we want. We want to highlight some of the main issues and refer to the chapter that addresses this particular issue. So we start on a positive note. The town has a diversified economy and opportunities for growth. As I said, we're developing this narrative a little bit more to include more specific references about the individual chapters, cultural and recreational amenities, and how to leverage those for quality of life and economic development. Another key priority is this comes out of the economic development chapter, and we're spending a little bit more real estate on this, is the town's heavily dependence on residential properties that contribute 91.32% of the local tax base. So we're making a case here for expanding this tax base to include more commercial through various strategies that are again discussed at length in the economic development chapter. But some ideas are new revenue streams, untapped revenue streams such as fees on short-term rentals, special assessments for infrastructure improvements, local meals tax. These points come out of our conversations with John Allen, who made some of these recommendations. Maximizing land use efficiency. Another point is supporting major employers, addressing land development challenges, revitalizing commercial district, and expanding economic development functions. And then another key finding is this idea that, again, we discussed in economic development, is coupling incentives with regulatory tools to make sure that Grafton directs growth in appropriate areas, such as the village centers, but also that it encourages development and life sciences development, housing development, and so on. So making sure that these two strategies are used as for future development. I think, you know, that's that transpired in a lot of our conversations. It's present in a lot of the chapters, this preoccupation with the direction of development for the next 10 to 20 years. Sorry about that. Increasing the supply of housing. That's something that we also want to highlight and expand a little bit more. And then we close with a conclusion about Grafton's strengths and how that ties into the vision that the committee put together. And this is it for the intro. And then I'll go through, well, what I have here is individual chapter landing pages. So these are the cover pages for every chapter. Just to show you some of the graphics, the chapters will be color coordinated with these pages. And again, most of these photos come from Grafton Recreation and Grafton Fire. Prior planning efforts, implementation, and then closing with the appendix.
Nicely done, Elena.
Great. I'm glad you like it. We'll keep refining it.
It's awesome. The pictures are amazing. Good job.
They're wonderful. Grafton Recreation has done an amazing job over the years. So we had a lot to choose from. And we have our own pictures as well, but these pictures that capture everyday life in Grafton, I think are priceless. And so I'm really glad they gave us permission to use them. Let us know if you have comments, if you think we should include something, change something. So any comments on both the graphics and the contents of the introduction, we welcome them at this point. So over the next, Pauline, sorry, go ahead.
This is going to be really minor, but one of the last graphics you showed of the firefighters working on a truck, there was a full license plate visible. I don't know if we should like kind of smudge that out.
That is a great catch. Thank you for highlighting that. Yeah, we'll make sure it's blurred or covered in some way. Any other questions? So as I mentioned, sorry, in the next 2 weeks or so, we'll finalize the edits, and then we'll start putting chapters in design so that we, we fill all of this with chapter content. This is basically the layout of the chapters. And then we'll send you a full draft. Fiona, I know this is due, for grant purposes, this is due before the end of the year, right?
I don't know. Oh, before the end of the full project or this particular section?
I'm not sure whether you need to send the full draft for the grant.
Yeah, I think we can send deliverables at, the end of spring 2025.
Okay.
I'm just still updating them on our, quarterly progress. So I don't think there's pressure for you to have this finalized by any means.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that will give us a little bit more time to work on the graphics, but if you need the full draft, we can definitely give you that for any sort of reporting purposes.
No, I think you're good. Can I just 2 comments quickly? The first chapter, I've noticed that the blurb boxes that are kind of called out in the chapters have the kind of curved edge. And I think in the first chapter was sharp corner edges, which is super nitpicky. I'm sorry, but I can't help it. My
Not at all.
my OCD will, yeah. So there's some curve, and then there's, I think, so I guess maybe just like making sure that formatting is uniform, and but other than that, so it looks awesome. Did the Mashpee working group want to have the more of that Grafton green color in this as well? I think it's in there, but it's kind of scattered throughout, and I don't know if you wanted to.
Maybe we should, this is the green, right?
Yes, that's it. Yes. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, if it's captured there, then that's fine by me. But I just want to make sure the group doesn't have any thoughts on that.
We could make one of these intro sections, you know, maybe the first one you see, maybe all of the intro sections could be the Grafton green, and then only the chapters could be color coded for navigation, ease of navigation.
Whatever the group wants. I just thought of it and thought I would mention it.
Is there any wiggle room for the cover photo? It's a cool photo, but it's also just like a rooftop.
Yes.
I don't know if there's just like better, and then the rest of the pictures are so great that it's like the lead photo seems kind of just, it's a great building, but like a weird angle of it. I don't know.
I was sort of thinking the same thing with the railroad tracks kind of coming up from the top, and it's, you know, a little lack of greenery. Yeah, it's a little sparse there. I agree.
Maybe what we need to do is compile a few options for the cover photo and run it by the working group. We have some drone footage. You know, it looks spectacular, but it's a little impersonal. So maybe we'll work with, we'll keep looking for pictures of, you know, maybe events in Grafton. We found many of them on Grafton Recreation. They're a little bit low resolution, so we'll have to see if they have the original, but we'll find a collection.
Yeah, if we're picking at nits here, this cover photo we're looking at is also overexposed.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, we'll find an alternative. It is, you know, it will be, I do hope they have the originals because some of them are a little bit low resolution, but for print, you need a little bit higher resolution, but I think we can work with what we have from Grafton Recreation. Any other questions?
Anything else on this? You know, this at least is making it look like here's something that's actually coming together. And yeah, overall, I like the design of this, but yeah, I'm sure we can all, this first chance any of us have had to see this. So, you know, publication design is a whole another art form that, you know, I'm nowhere near an expert in publication design.
Yeah, it will take a few iterations of this. So we welcome your input and nitpicking because it really is about nitpicking.
Yeah. And yeah, ultimately, this is something that we would like to think that this will have a positive impact on Grafton going forward. And like it or not, the cosmetics sometimes mean more than the substance to some readers. I do know that I'm, you know, I personally sometimes am kind of put off if the cosmetics, if the style of presentation or something, if I find something annoying just looking at it, I might not pay as much attention as I should to the actual substantive content. So to a point, the style and the design do make a difference.
Yeah, please let us know. We want this to be, we want the design to facilitate reading. So to the extent that we can highlight paragraphs and break paragraphs, highlight headlines. That's basically what we want. So if you find something difficult to read or the graphics are conflicting with the reading flow, let us know. I made a page in the comment spreadsheet for the intro. So one of the tabs, the last one, is now called introduction. So any comments on both the content of the introduction and the graphics, feel free to leave them there. Maybe I didn't save it yet.
Yep, it's an empty page, but it's there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
All right, are we good? We've been at it for getting close to 2 hours. And if there's, what else? Oh, what did I do with the agenda? There it is. Yep. Next steps, I think we've been talking about next steps here. There's our next meeting would normally be January 6th. And unless anybody has a problem with that, we'll assume we'll go with it. Which effectively between now and January 6th, there's not really a lot of time. The end of the month holidays always seems like it always the better part of 2 weeks where nothing really gets done.
So Elena and Sarah and CMRPC, so will we just discuss the remainder of those chapters that we because we talked about economic development and land use this evening and the non-chapter elements. So I'm assuming quality of life and services and facilities will be on our radar for January.
We've picked up, and Sarah can speak more to this. We picked up most of the comments for those.
Okay.
But, we can bring them back into rotation if there are new comments.
Nope, that wasn't. I was just wanted to just make sure that I had it straight. But we can connect. I don't want to take up any more of the group's time. We'll connect offline. That's all I had. Sorry.
Okay, anybody have anything else? If nothing else, perhaps a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Mr. Carroll.
Carol's eye.
Ms. Duckworth.
Aye.
Ms. Fox.
Aye.
Ms. Foley.
Foley, aye.
Mr. Hool.
Aye.
Mr. Petrie. Apparently he's already abandoned us. Mr. Robbins votes aye. Ms. Robbins.
Aye.
And Ms. Roy.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.